G'day guys, Toast20 here, welcome back to Oceania. One of my favourite things to do within City Skylines is to jump into one of the cars and just follow along as it drives through the city streets, just seeing your city up nice and close. It is just super fun. We've been working on Oceania for a year now, and we have a lot of completed roads, particularly within the city, but there is one stretch of road that I've been wanting to work on for quite a long time. It is the highway that stretches from Dundee to our newly built country town of Paterson. And the reason why I've been wanting to work on it for so long is because the city of Dundee is our capital city. It is very built up with lots of highways and roads and buildings and all that stuff you'd find in a city. And then as you leave the city, you head along the highway, go through a bit of farmland, go through some mountains, past the dam. Not only does the landscape change, but the types of trees start to get a little bit different as you get further away from the coastline and the city. Towns and houses become further apart. Architecture changes. The types of things you see on this journey changes as you leave the city. I love this sort of stuff. This is a road trip. I love road trips. We're building a bit of a road trip. What it's like to leave the city, get into the countryside, and watch the environment change. That's what we're doing here. But you know what? It's going to take a little while. I thought this was going to be a one episode type of thing. Now we're going to have to split this up because it ended up being a bit longer, hence the reason why this episode is a day late. I've just been getting really carried away, and I'm also going to keep it all time-lapse, and in the next episode we'll do a live play, do a bit of a road trip, have a little fly around, make sure everything is working the way that it should be. And you know what? You guys have been pretty keen for this too, because I had triple the amount of comments in the last episode when I asked you guys at the end of the video, what should we put on a road trip from Dundee to Paterson? Man, I got a lot of comments. So I took a lot of screenshots of those comments so that I could implement them within this episode, but I've also kept them for future episodes as well, because there's a lot of things that I thought, you know what, that would be better out in the outback, or that would be better along the coastline. So if you don't see one of your things mentioned in this build, it's most probably kept for a future one. We're starting our journey off at Paterson, so we're going to be starting in the countryside, in this country town, and we're going to be heading towards the main city. And I just had to add a couple of things within Paterson. I had to add an extra road for our little commercial strip there. It was pretty inaccessible for people trying to get back into Paterson, so that should fix that problem. We've got some billboards heading into Paterson. I wanted to show that because we are starting to get closer to a town, we did need to put in some billboards to advertise some of the things that you probably find down there. And of course, a little lookout as well, because it is very scenic around here, and a lot of these places do have lookouts, particularly if you do have some sort of mountainside. It's a nice opportunity to have a look at the town you're about to visit, or just a little pit stop. But this area in particular, I mean, you've got Mount Grey in the back, the Megalong Valley, the two towns, forest, rivers. It's just a beautiful little lookout. Oh, and by the way, name suggestions, guys. I mean, I'm really enjoying the names that you guys are coming up with, but let me know if you do have any other names for anything that we are building. So I actually would like to go through and add signs for all these places. So the lookout, the dam as well. We don't have a name for this whole dam area. This whole dam area. No, I don't mean the whole dam area. I mean this area that is a dam. This thing on the screen, it's a dam. I don't have a name for it at the moment. So if you've got a name, let me know. And speaking of names, I do have a name now for the little town that sits just outside of Paterson. This name came in by Robert Correa, and he wrote that seeing as Paterson is named after Banjo Paterson, who is an Australian poet and is on the Australian $10 note, on the other side of the note is Dame Mary Gilmore, who is another Australian writer. And Robert suggests that maybe we call the town Gilmore because, I mean, on the other side of the note, on the other side of the river, they're kind of neighbors. I quite like the connection, so that little town is now named Gilmore, which is also just a really nice name for a town. Not that the town is particularly nice, it is just a nice little name for a town. So we got Gilmore, we got Paterson, but other names are very much welcome. A big chunk of the suggestions were around the lake, so we are going to be spending a fair amount of time detailing the lake and adding in a lot of stops along the way, particularly around the highway, and also some walking tracks too. What we are doing at the moment is just working on the tourist area of the dam, because I figured this would be a great opportunity for people to stop off, explore, maybe go for a walk across the dam. So I wanted to keep it functional, so this whole thing is now a park, so that people can actually go and visit it. We have tons of dams in Australia, and they pretty much all have an area where you can picnic or put a boat in, or just areas of recreation. So I am taking inspiration from a whole bunch of them, particularly around New South Wales, to really sell that this place is an area where a lot of people are caravanning and just going on road trips. I am trying to place down mostly forward drives, a lot of caravans attached to these vehicles. So you are seeing a lot of that. It's just all part of the creating this whole road trip, this whole feeling of now we're out of the town, well, now we're out of the city, and we are traveling along these areas where a lot of people are visiting. Caravanning and camping are massive in Australia and New Zealand. A lot of people will just grab a caravan and do it up and then travel around Australia or New Zealand, and it could take them a whole year, could take them 2 years. I know people who have done several years traveling around Australia, and I think both countries are really well set up for it. I know there's a lot of free camping spots within Australia as well, so you can actually just find these places and camp for free. If you're in a caravan, it's pretty perfect. I remember I traveled from Sydney all the way to Perth, which is on the other side of Australia, and pretty much staying in all free camping sites. And some of them are pretty bare bones, but pretty much all of them have amazing views and are in just incredible locations, and you're practically by yourself. So I am putting quite a lot of campers, and I'll also put down a couple of tents as well in just some of these places. Something that I just placed down really quickly and I've got to talk about is this little dirt road that heads off from the highway, and what that is, and I don't know if this is in other countries, I'm sure it must be, but this is definitely something that you notice when you are driving along some of these steep inclines, these mountains or hills. You'll have these little sections, these little bits of road that just stretch up along the hillside, and they are for vehicles that are, and I think it's probably mostly for trucks. If their brakes are to fail, then they can take these exits instead, just to slow themselves down. They're usually gravel or sand, so they slow down pretty quickly. I feel like it's one of those things that you ask your parents when you're on a road trip, because they are kind of strange. Like, where does that road go, Mum? And then they say, oh, that's for this. And you go, oh, okay, that's very interesting. And then you notice it all the time, every time you go on one of these road trips. A lot of people suggesting that I build some areas for camping and like cabins along this lake. So I am putting in a couple. This is one that I wanted to also put some sort of boat ramp in. Like I said, a lot of these lakes do have boat ramps and places to camp and stay at. I really wanted to use some of these cabins. I guess these are probably less likely in Australia, but maybe this is something more in New Zealand, or maybe I'm just sort of making this up. I actually go back and add in a campground instead. Well, not instead, but just next to all those cabins. Sort of figured maybe those cabins are more for like bathrooms or information, or just little stays or something like that. You just saw that little guy driving down there, which is kind of cool. It's always nice seeing tourists actually using these areas. I don't know. I really love that whole idea of seeing people leave the city and go into some of these areas and visit it for real. It's, I don't know, real fun stuff. That's probably my favorite part. One of my favorite parts of this game. A lot of suggestions for old looking little petrol stations, little servos. So this is my very rundown servo on the side here. I wanted to keep this one privately owned and looking really run down. It might not even be used anymore. These cars on the side definitely aren't used. I reckon this place, I couldn't find any assets to do this, but I reckon this would be a place where you get fishing tackle or fish bait. They probably tell some sort of folklore about the fish down at the lake down there, and probably some kind of very terrible restaurant attached to it. But maybe it's disused, who knows. But these cars, love the cars around it. Definitely need more of these sort of areas that have a lot of these cars in the, these disused cars. That seems to be a real thing. People start collecting vehicles in their yards the further out of cities you get. So we'll have to do some more of them. I wanted to keep this stretch of road pretty open. I didn't really want to place too much around here, so we'll just put a couple of little pockets of like servos and, you know, truck stops and stuff like that, but nothing in terms of farms. It's not really an area that you would typically find farms. We will actually do a whole episode of that next week. That's going to be the focus for that one, closer to Dundee, and even the Megalong Valley definitely needs some farms. But I wanted to add a bit more detail into this mountainside, so I am putting in a lot more ridges just to show the erosion and just to show that this area has a lot of water runoff, and it is also quite dry and arid because, I mean, that is Australia. Australia is very dry and very arid, so wanted to put in a lot more of these ridges, which I love, particularly when you get the shadows right and they cast a shadow into some of these areas. I think just looks so nice. I'll definitely show that off in the cinematics. Now we're starting to work on the road that goes around the dam. I figured we definitely needed something that goes around this lake. It's probably more of a service road than anything else, but I'm sure that a lot of people would fish off some of this road. And I also wanted it to connect up to the walking track that I had started. I didn't really want to drag out a whole walking track around, but I think that this is definitely the sort of road that you would walk along as part of a bigger walk for the lake, because a lot of people suggesting that there was a big walk around, but I think that a dirt road would be really nice. I think this would be a really nice walk. It does get pretty steep up on that outer ridge, but it would still be pretty nice. And then of course, adding in those details, putting in just some of those ridges, just really defining them. I think it just looks so much better. And yeah, you can see me here just working on that connection, just reshaping how that road looks. But I guess I'll probably have to place some sort of, I don't know, maybe like invisible little park spawners maybe. I don't know. I need to place something around because I would like to see people walking across there, not really driving. I don't really want to see people driving across there. I just feel like it needs to be really barren, no one really around. I want to only really see people walking, and that's about it. Maybe a couple of service vehicles, but I don't really know how to encourage that. But yeah, really don't want to see people driving around on that road. Just feels like it needs to be open, just not that many people. And I almost don't really like how many people are driving from Paterson to Dundee. Something nice about leaving the city is that there are less people on the road, but there seems to be quite a lot of people actually using the road, so we will probably have to work on a bit more of the public transport situation. There is that one train line, but at the moment, it's just one train going back and forth because it is just a one-way train line, and I don't exactly want to make it two-way. It just, I don't know, well, at least two lines. I feel like that kind of ruins it. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that either. But I think definitely a bus service would help things a lot more. Not that there's heaps of people on the roads, but I just want to see it a little bit more desolate, if anything. But I guess something to note is that this won't be the most open and barren road we'll do in Oceania. There's actually other roads, even from Paterson to, out in the real outback area of Oceania. That's going to be very barren, very open. Quite a lot of the suggestions that were left in the last episode, I'm leaving for that build because I think would definitely match something that was, more typically found on a really open road. Whereas this road, I mean, it's still 2 lanes. There's it's still a pretty developed highway, and there's still like a bit of infrastructure around, and the fact that there's a university out of Paterson, and it's not even like hugely far away, but it is kind of far away. So I did want to try and keep it sort of developed and not massively open and barren and, not very many people getting around. But I think we're definitely going to have some areas that are going to be a lot, quite sparse. Of course, had to add another servo. This one is a bit more modern, but it's very small, intentionally small. I wanted to make this one just a much smaller version of our Coral, which is the custom brand of Oceania, which I absolutely love. And I have attached a very dingy, very old, I mean, you just would not stay here, but yeah, just a motel there. Kind of like a last resort motel. Another massive suggestion from you guys. So making it look pretty old, looking pretty terrible, but also kind of close to the lake. This might be like the last bit of accommodation close to the lake. I didn't want to do too much around, like in terms of accommodation around the lake. We will have other opportunities to do stuff like that in other areas of the map. I was a bit stuck with the barrier around the highway. Didn't really know. I don't know. I was kind of thinking that we had to do some sort of barrier, but I don't know if it really is necessary. So I will actually get rid of that barrier, but it was just a bit of an experiment. I do put it around some areas, some tight corners, some areas that are very close to an edge. I do a custom barrier in some of those areas. I don't know if I do it on camera, but they're definitely there. We'll fly around to those areas in the next episode. But what I wanted to put here was a bit of a truck stop and also an area where, like a rest area. A little rest area. We have a lot of these within Australia. These are areas where you can just park, and a lot of these places have got free tea and coffee, and they're just to encourage people to stop and take a break. They're usually between towns and areas where there's like quite a lot of fatigue. So got one there, and it's in a pretty nice spot. It's got a nice little view. It's definitely like not a particularly nice little spot, especially with these trucks right there as well. It's probably not very realistic. I don't even know how these trucks are going to get out. I'm also sure that trucks reverse in rather than go face first, but whatever. It is what it is. Pretty nice shot with that train going past though. Isn't that just lovely? Can't wait for a little train ride at some stage. And now we are going to work on a bit of the train line because, as you recall, I did have a bit of a problem a couple of episodes ago. I didn't really know how to transition this train line from this area down the mountain to Dundee. It is super steep, and I didn't think it was very realistic for the train just to, I don't know, plummet down the mountain. It seemed kind of unrealistic. So I thought instead we will follow the mountain a bit more. So it actually cuts through this forested area. We'll get rid of those trees and winds down the mountain. It actually looks way better like that. And it is way more gradual, but just something that you would more likely see. What I'm using is Move It and then selecting all the nodes and then just making them slope up very gradually. And it works so well. I mean, magic. We used to have to do this manually with Move It. Now we don't even have to worry about it. And then I just make the mountain fit along that train line. So kind of doing the opposite of what, I don't know, I guess maybe the opposite of what you usually do. Try and make the train line fit within the mountain. Instead, I'm making the mountain fit within the train line. I think it's a much easier way of doing it. And then you can just get in there with the ridges and the valleys and making it just look a lot more detailed, these mountains. I mean, I love the way this mountain looks. Again, we do need a name for this mountain. We've named a bunch of mountains, but not this one. So we could definitely use a name for it. And we're also going to put like some farmland down here. So this whole area, this is when I started realizing that this episode is a lot bigger than I expected. So we're starting to get to that portion where I go, okay, let's do a whole episode on farmland, and we'll tackle a bunch of the different farmlands around Oceania, because it's not just this area, but the Megalong Valley as well, which is close to Patterson and Gilmore. It definitely needs a little bit of detail and actual farm functionality too. So making crops and getting it to our industrial areas. I just wanted to finish up by fixing up this highway. This is such a silly thing of me, but I just wanted to make sure that the highway, like the two roads, had space between them. Like, that's ridiculous. But I just felt like when you leave a city, the highways get much wider, there's a lot more space, and there's no real barriers between the two roads except for a bit of space. So I wanted to do that as well. But that's it. That's it for this episode. We're not doing a live play. I'm so used to doing live plays in these episodes, but I totally ran out of time. So apologies for that. We will do one in the next episode when we work on the farms, which I am super excited for because it's going to really make this area just look so much better. If you've enjoyed this episode, then leave it a like. Definitely helps out the channel a lot. And if you are new and want to follow along, then subscribe to the channel. That will definitely be the best option for following along as we build up Oceania. Big thanks to the amazing supporters over on Patreon, supporting the channel and helping me make these videos. Derek Colwell, my real name is OG, Jacqueline Blackburn, Jacob, Alexander Herr, Xavier Diaz, Mashab Nosantio, William, Thomas Puckridge, Hayden George, Alexander Nagard, Claire, and Ryan Ingold. Guys, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!